So I'm going to share with you a collection of artists that I photographed and knew that were friends and that were a part of my life in some way. I didn't go out just to go and photograph artists or famous artists. I had some sort of relationship, or before I approached them, if I didn't know them, I called them and they all accepted the idea of the style that I was going to photograph them in. And some of which I'll show you that I used a flexible mirror with Mylar. So let me get started.
Okay, good.
Okay, enough.
Great. Okay.
Hey, hi. So here I am. This is one of the first Mylars that I ever did. And this was an artist, and his name was Ted Davies. And he's the one who I give credit to, who introduced me to use a flexible mirror, which he thought that when I was shooting, he saw me shoot very close up, and he thought that I would like to use this material. So this is the first photograph that I've shot. This is Mabel D'Amico, husband, president of the Art Barge.
Linda, can you tell us a little bit? Let's go back a moment. Can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances that you shot this with Mabel?
Mabel and I were friends, and I was always out. I had carte blanche out at the Art Barge, but this was at her house, and I was friends with her. And I did not know her husband, who was the president who started the Art Barge in Amagansett in Napeague. And I just always was able to go over to the house and have oysters and clams and wonderful dinners, and we became friends, and this was it. And then at the end of her life, which is now, I jumped in and I did a little bit of medical with her. And this was when she was dying. She was beautiful. This is probably a day before she passed away, and this is in the collection of the Parish Museum, Mabel D'Amico. Alfonso Osorio, again, I actually worked with Alfonso Osorio at his house, which was 66 acres of evergreens and conifers and of trees. And once I got him back onto getting good health, he taught me trees, and we photographed for 2 years of gardens and taught me French wine. That's Alfonso Osorio. That's the first photograph I ever took of him. Incredible person. Anything you want to ask me?
Linda, I'm wondering,
This was in his kitchen.
How do you, the person, when you're photographing anyone, in this particular case, someone who's a very noted artist and a collector and a very, very wealthy man, perhaps people might want privacy, they might feel intimidated. How do you get somebody to, what's your relationship? How do you get them to feel comfortable behind the camera? Any tips or anything?
Every photograph I've ever taken, especially, I ask permission, and it's not, I'm not really a paparazzi. So they all knew that I was going to continue as a fine art photographer. And we always had a connection, and you can see it in his eyes. The nice thing about going through these photographs are they're so alive for me. When I look at Alfonso, I just want to say hi.
Any memories, just for fun, of what would be any memory that stands out in particular about Alfonso?
Good French Bordeaux, and teaching me the gardens, 66 acres of trees, and wonderful conversations. Just, I mean, no offense if any artist is alive. I think he was the most intelligent man I ever met. Had a great book collection too. I'll show you. There he is. I put that in at the last minute. That was Alfonso's bedroom, and books came every Friday. Every Friday, cartons of books. His wealth was not really a part of, I never thought about his wealth, actually. Dorothy Norman and Alfonso Osorio. Dorothy Norman was visiting. Alfonso Osorio had her as a guest. Dorothy Norman, the lover of Alfred Stieglitz. So when Stieglitz and O'Keefe, I think O'Keefe moved to New Mexico. Anyway, Dorothy Norman was a writer and a photographer, lived in East Hampton, and was part of Stieglitz's life. Amy Zerner and Monty Farber, very old friends of mine, artists in East Hampton, tapestry artists, writers. This is all shot with film. Dorothy Norman again. Dorothy Norman and Alfonso Osorio. Seal Lord, married Seal Lord, an artist, painter, abstract expressionist, very close with Pollock and Lee Krasner, has her own wonderful person.
And how did you meet her?
I worked with her. And again, she always trusted me with the camera. I was I had access through my work, and I was sort of they trusted me. And Betty Friedan.
Just to a point of clarification, Linda, did you make it clear when you're saying my work? I'm not sure everybody knows what you did besides being an artist.
Oh, I am a registered nurse, and but not really practicing actively too much anymore. But so I got to meet a lot of people through my nursing, but I kept my photography separate. And somehow they all let me photograph them. I don't know how that happened. I know Osorio let me, Chuck believed in my photography.
Now, Linda, you had told me a story about this when I was in your house, how you captured this. This is Chuck Close.
Oh yeah, this is Chuck Close. And what happened with this is that I had been shooting a lot of water. Well, I had been shooting Mylar, which was a flexible mirror. And then after that, I worked with water. So I started shooting people in nudes in water, portraits in water, when it turned into a sheet of glass. So one day I was going over to Chuck's house, and I happened to have my camera in the car, which I shoot with a Rolleiflex, and I don't always carry it with me. And I walked in, and there he was floating in his swimming pool, which he liked to do, and was able to get in and out of the pool by himself. And the water was a sheet of glass that made a close-up of Chuck Close. So this is the close-up of Chuck. And I told him what was happening. He said, well, do you have your camera? And I said, yeah, I do. He goes, well, go get it. So he was very, very supportive, and, let me go on my way. Dan Flavin.
And Dan Flavin has the Dan Flavin Institute in Bridgehampton.
Dan Flavin is the Dan Flavin Institute in Bridgehampton. He also has a permanent installation at the Manna Contemporary in Jersey City, which I highly recommend people to go to that place. Manna Contemporary. Dan, very important artist. And he trusted me. And Dan, so they all had different personalities, and somehow I was fortunate that they trusted me with my camera and knew. And these pictures of Flavin did go to his foundation. They purchased it, so they know that these pictures exist. And Dan was a very private person, so I was very respectful to his son, and his foundation has them. I'd like him to go up to Dia though. Randall Rosenthal with Karen in rubber gloves. Young Jake. Young Jake.
Tell us about Jake.
Well, Jake is young Jake Patterson. He's an artist, and I've known him since he was young, and I photographed him, and there he is. And now he even looks different again because he's older. And he's a artist. He grew up out here, and I knew his family, and I knew he was going to be a great artist. And I guess I always photographed the family anyway, because I just thought they were just an amazing children. And I love the photograph. Whoever this person is, it didn't matter. I just liked who he was, and he is a good artist. And I photographed him, and there he is. And now he even looks different again because he's older. And he's a artist. He grew up out here, and I knew his family, and I knew he was going to be a great artist. And I guess I always photographed the family anyway, because I just thought they were just an amazing children. And I love the photograph. Whoever this person is, it didn't matter. I just liked who he was, and he is a good artist. And this is Trip Patterson's brother from Tripoli Gallery. Candace Hill. No, I'll come back to her. This was shot on my porch. Bastian and Philippe, artist.
And he's a photographer as well.
Great photographer. His wife, great photographer, great artist. Joyce Raimondo, photographer. I think she said, she was having tea at my house and said, but let me photograph her. Knew I was going to photograph her that way.
Now,
she has the front cover of a photography book that's 100 years of photography, and she shot with an 8x10 camera. Joyce Raimondo.
Was there a reason you chose to photograph her without her clothes on?
I think Joyce was just comfortable. She was a bit of an exhibitionist, and not an exhibitionist. She was comfortable, and she always said I'd be the only one that she'd let photograph like that. She trusted me with the camera. This is Candace Hill, by the way, a wonderful artist. Does weaving, painting, landscape with yarn. Philippe and Bastian, Joyce Raimondo, Ingeborg Tanhoff, and John Githens. She's passed away, an artist. This belt Osorio gave to her.
Now, can I ask you a question, Linda?
Yes.
When you photograph couples, do you arrange these two figures, or they just happen to be sitting that way? Or how do you think about a couple? Or is it just
actually none of these were ever really arranged? I don't get paid for, I don't go there and say, I'd like to photograph you. I was invited to a party, and Ingeborg liked my photography. And when I said, could I photograph you? She said, yes. A little bit posed, but she knew what I was doing and trusted me. John Chamberlain. They all have stories.
What's the story?
Well, John came up from Sarasota and moved to Sag Harbor, and he found an apartment in Sag Harbor and had a sailboat there, and I got to know John. That's it. Dan Weldon, printmaker, master.
Yeah. Dan Weldon did one of our Zoom talks. He is a very, in addition to being a printmaker, he's a great teacher too. He teaches printmaking all over the world.
introduced John to his wife, Prudence. Dan Weldon, I love this photograph of Dan. Carolyn Blackwood Lowell, writer in Sag Harbor. Lowell, she was married to Robert Lowell, the poet. Kristoff Demenil.
Now these are your Mylar series.
This is a Mylar series, and this was also done at her house, and I used a flexible mirror, and she knew exactly what I was going to be doing. And I went up there and put the mirror up. I just push pinned it, and I used the light of the reflection of a flexible, distorted mirror. And I stood to the side and took their portraits. And this is a portrait of Kristoff.
Now, for one like this, did you take a lot of this? How many photos did you take of this one person before you chose that this is the photo?
Not very many. I usually, this one was shot with a 35 millimeter. When I shoot with a 2 1/4, I only shoot 12 pictures. And I usually get one photograph out of 12. And this particular series that I did of Kristoff, I got 3 photographs out of 24, and that was shot with film. Cappy Edmondson, he was a painter in Sag Harbor during the de Kooning days and Pollock days, but really didn't want to be involved with that whole crew, and could paint the sea, and had just painted and painted, and you find his paintings all over the Hamptons so he could eat. And now the collection has been pulled together by Terry Wallace and the Whaling Museum. Terry Wallace is an art dealer in East Hampton, and a lot of paintings are at the Whaling Museum, and now at the church in Sag Harbor, they have one of Cappy's paintings. Some people just thought he was an old drunk, but really there was a book written about him by Terry Wallace, and he wasn't just an old drunk. But at the end he was, and but I was the last person to photograph him. And we spent the afternoon together. Mary Heilman, that was painter, Mary Heilman. David Slater, Mylar, beginning of my Mylar. Anybody who doesn't know these people, they're all artists. And that David and Aliska were a couple at the time. And that's Alana Heiss. She was the director of PS1 Museum.
Linda, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I'm just
With
rambling
the
here.
process of these Mylar pictures, it's so abstract. Was it completely spontaneous? Did you have an idea in mind? How did you work with the Mylar? And then at what point, I'm a little confused about the process.
Well, every person that I approached, Alana Heiss knew what I was going to do. I told her I had a flexible mirror. And the fact that I got the director of PS1 to let me come to her barn and put up a mirror, and she stood in front of it. And when the light hit it, I stood to the side, so I saw what portrait I was taking. She wasn't seeing what I was seeing. And, but they knew they were going to have their image made more abstract. And the more abstract it was as a portrait, the better it was. This was the first one I took of Ted Davies. And I think I repeated this. This might have been in the beginning. He's the one that thought that the way I shot people so close up, that he thought that I would like the material of using a mirror that was flexible. And I did.
And with these images, what I'm curious is, was this somewhat random in the sense that you pin it up and then you're like, wow, look at that's how that came out. You didn't manipulate it in any way.
Nothing was
preconceived
manipulated.
idea.
No, actually, John Chamberlain, the first time he saw the Mylar, he was so encouraging. He said, when you go to people's studios, put it up as fast as you can and get out as fast as you can. Because he knew what I was trying to do. So once I got on a roll with photographing people in Mylar, everybody I called accepted it. And not everybody, there were a few women that did not want to be photographed that way. Probably for vanity reasons. But this was John's Mylar, which was actually the front cover of a one-woman show I did at Glenn Horowitz's rare bookseller in East Hampton. And it I always said the Mylar never lied. It was a joke. It was like, this reminds me of John in some ways, of his art. Steve Miller, one of all these artists were at the very beginning. I did Mylar in the 90s. So this was Mylar that I put on the floor of his studio where he looked down at himself. Chuck Close, that was in his studio. Very cooperative with Mylar. He loved it. Chuck Close, Mylar. Steve Miller, the two sides of Steve Miller. Fun. Great studio, surfboards in the background, Chamberlain sculpture. But back then, early Mylar. Larry Rivers. So nothing was digital. They knew what I was doing. I walked in with a Rolleiflex camera, cranked it, took their picture. They looked right into it. And of course, everybody has a little story, but we don't have time for that. Larry was pretty funny. Scott Cohen, poet. Dan Weldon. I guess it doesn't matter who these people are. It's all about the image.
Well, what do you mean?
Warren Padula and Elaine. Well, it's about the photograph. It does not necessarily about who the people are, but yeah, this is Elaine and Warren. Amy Zerner, tapestry artist, tarot card reader. So they all kind of went together with what they did somehow. Pat Steer, painter.
Mm-hmm. And they become very abstract.
I tried to make it as abstract as possible. Dan Rizzi.
That one almost,
Jack Larson.
Could you go? Yeah. This one almost looks like an abstract expressionist painting in a way.
That's good.
Yeah,
it looks good. I'm glad painterly. I like that. Yeah, well, that's what most people thought. They thought it looked more painterly.
Yeah.
Jack Larson, Billy Sullivan. But if I don't talk, I won't talk. Alan Shields, Terry Elkins, Robert Miller, not an artist, but I love this one.
What do you love about it?
I love that he's missing a head, that the Mylar played with the light when this was in his garage. He was an art gallerist. And Robert, I called him up. I was working with Alfonso Osorio. I had absolutely no fear whatsoever calling all these people up. It was like a surfboard. I was painting and everybody accepted. So Robert Miller, there he was. And when the light hit it, I played with light. Alana Heiss again. Randall Rosenthal, Matt Sachs, Kristoff Demenil, and Jenny Gorman and Esme, mother-daughter artist.
Beautiful. Linda, thank you so much. Linda K. Alpern. Let's give Linda K. Alpern a Zoom round of applause for her. That was just so enjoyable just to see all those beautiful images. And we do have time for questions. So does anybody have a question, or would somebody like to share? Okay, Christina Stratfield, could you explain a little bit about beyond your photography, the other work that you do?
Linda explained that you were an artist. Yeah. What? Excuse me?
Explain to us beyond the photographing the artist, other creative aspects of your life. What else? You're a painter, or what other subjects?
Well, basically, I'm a photographer, but I do paint, and I'm painting more and more. And but I've painted since I was young, in school, in college, but I never took it any place. So now I've been painting.
And what other subjects do you photograph?
Children, a lot of children, people, just people in general, whatever captivates me. The pandemic was interesting. That was a whole different, I did some photographing in New York. I think my photographs are like a painting. I don't just randomly photograph. When I feel like photographing and I deliberately go out and photograph, I know what I know what I want to photograph at the time that I want to photograph. Like I see some of you right now that I want to photograph.
I'm going to get her to photograph me when this is done. No, I'm just teasing, Linda.
I see you.
So let's see. I'm going to read some of the questions. Dorothea says, how old are the subjects at the time of the photos? Do you have, it's a range, or?
They're all different ages. They're all different ages. I showed you a lot of older photographs, not Matt Sachs, but the Mylar are older, in the 90s. But basically I wanted to show you the different styles too.
And Heba says, but wouldn't it be more important if the artist would be recognized for their art, or are these images, do they have no contribution to who they are? Do you understand the question? Like, do you feel, does it matter that there's no indication of what the artist does in the artist photo?
No, because it's my relationship with that person. It's not about their art.
Yeah, and I think I think
they know that they know when I was with them that we had a relationship, and that's why I photographed them. And it's not about them.
You know what? Also, I think that your point is well taken. There's different ways to photograph artists. So some of the ones that I showed, it's the artist in the studio or the artist at work. And it's about the artist's work. When Linda has approached it, it's really a more intimate, it's about the friendship, the relationship, and a general portrait of the person who happens to be an artist. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So it shows different approaches.
Christina Strasfield, you wrote, but you have so many different types of photos.
There's an exhibition at the church, which is an art space in Sag Harbor. And the exhibition explores water. So what is that photo about?
This was a photograph that was up, and this was a water series, and the person knew that I was going to photograph them. So I said, call me in the morning when your swimming pool turns into a sheet of glass. And they did. And they came out and had a robe on, and I said, what's underneath your robe? And they had a negligee on. And they went in the water, and
it's an incredible photo.
And the water turned into a sheet of glass. I don't have it on there, but so when I was shooting water, I shot water at a specific time of the day, and I shot water for about a year after I worked with Mylar mirrors.
And what was it about the water in particular that interested you? Anything that you could?
I think just the reflections and the abstractions you can get from it. And the light.
But go see that exhibit. Linda's photo is incredible.
Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. I think that's
about
all I have.
We got more. Roisin Bateman has a question. Roisin.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Linda and Joyce. Gosh, that was amazing. And it's just a comment, and I've seen your photographs before, and there's so much humanity in them. It brings out like the best of every human being that you photograph. They're so at ease and relaxed and in their, I don't know, in their element. And but when you talk about having a relationship with them, now it makes sense. Like, how do you get there? Like, how do you get to that level of being able to do that as someone that sort of freezes in front of the camera? There, I think that's what's so powerful about those photographs is just that the humanity.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can tell though when people are uptight when I'm going to photograph them. It's not going to work. You know, it's just not going to work. If I say, "Can I photograph you, Roisin?" And then all of a sudden, what I see, it leaves. You know, and only another photographer knows that. I mean, all of a sudden, I'll see your spirit, and I'll go, "Oh wow!" Even if I have my cell phone, but if I have my Rolleiflex, you have to be at ease. Some people, I don't know.
I think that's interesting also, Linda. You said you see the person's spirit because
Well,
it's
yeah.
almost like a connection. It's a connection that's beyond words with the person.
I want to photograph them. I
Mhm.
feel something for the person. Even if I don't know the person, there's something about that person. Maybe it's narcissistic. It's about me. You know, I saw a man during the pandemic and he was balancing on his hips with no legs in New York. And I'd never done anything like that in my life. And it was in the pandemic and he was sitting in a wheelchair and he had no legs and is just in a wheelchair balancing on his hip bones. And I walked past him and then I came back and I said, "May I photograph you?" And I think it was because I was feeling so cut off at that time during the pandemic. And I went back, I pulled out my Rolleiflex, not my cell phone, put it right in front of his face. And you'll see when I exhibit it, he's smiling. So there was a connection. And this man, that I probably will never take another photograph like that again. But he felt safe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He didn't ask me for money. You know, it wasn't like, "Hey, do you have money now?" And that was a very intense thing for me to do because I spoke to a couple
Yeah.
of friends about that afterwards. And I said, "I'll never do that again." Hi, Eunice Golden. I see you're on.
And let's see, we have more very wonderful. Thank you. Fantastic, Linda Kay. And
Thank you, everybody.
Let's see. Oh, question. Christina had some good questions. Who was the most difficult artist you have photographed?
Good
Can you-
question.
can you
Good
say
question,
that?
Christina. Well, you know what they always say. Everybody likes a little gossip. Well, it's true. It's true. I heard a great curator say that, you know, but I don't know who was the most difficult. Well, Larry Rivers was kind of funny to photograph. He wasn't difficult, but when I went to his studio, he tried to shock me. So I walked in there and he knew exactly what I was doing when I put up the Mylar. And he turns to me, he goes, "I got to go take a piss." And I said, "All right." So he did. But instead of closing the door, he wanted to just sort of, you know, I was like, okay, you know, that was just Larry being Larry. I wouldn't say he was being difficult, but, you know, I didn't really have any difficulty photographing artists because they all knew what I was doing. You know, it flowed. I was very fortunate. I was fortunate and I was passed around and they trusted me. And, you know,
Larry Rivers would do that. He's known for doing that kind of a thing. I've heard numerous stories about that. But what I find wonderful about your photographs, some of the photographs, the Chuck Close I've seen before, that's a premiere shot. The photo of Dan Flavin in his studio is very, very rare because he's not
very rare.
not often photographed at all, and several other people.
I was the only one I think that photographed him, Walter.
I did at Guildhall.
I saw that.
But one of the things I want to say is your photographs are a bit not only abstract in ways, but they have a very strong surrealistic element to it. This dripping Dali quality to them gives it a wonderful, as you say, it's photography connecting with the very painterly, surrealistic element of delving into the soul and the mind of individuals and creating like the photograph where he doesn't have a head, but the head is separated.
Yes.
Wonderful. And it also, though, your work also has a connection with, I don't know to what degree you are familiar with Ouija's work.
Oh, yeah.
So that there was a period of time of Ouija's output where he does something somewhat similar, where he does these very distorted images. So there's a connection of that part of your work and that with Ouija. So there's a kind of lineage and lineage between your work and Ouija's work. It would be wonderful actually to see either a lecture or a symposium or perhaps even an exhibition or book contrasting your work with that of Ouija's.
I'm working on a book right now with somebody. Well, I have several homemade books, but right now we're working on a book of artists. So
Great.
we'll see. I don't think it's going to be compared to with Ouija, but Walter, didn't Ouija use like a fisheye lens though? Didn't he put like a lens on his camera?
Yes.
He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay.
Everybody, and that, by the way, that was Walter Weissman. Sitting next to Walter is Eunice Golden. Walter also photographs artists, and Eunice
hi.
Golden is a very prominent painter. And Walter gave a talk on one of our Zoom talks at the beginning of the pandemic. So great to see you.
And there's John and Carolyn. Thank you. It
And
was so nice of you to tune in to the Linda K. Alpern station.
Hi, Linda.
Okay, everybody, let's give Linda K. Alpern a big round of
Thank you,
applause,
everybody.
and thank you for coming to this wonderful Zoom talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And hope this inspires you to want to learn more.